My name is Miriam Carter, 34, and I once believed anniversaries were sacred. 5 years together, countless memories, and a family heirloom bracelet that survived the Great Depression just like my grandma did. I never imagined I'd be sitting alone at a bar watching my husband James slip that very bracelet onto another woman's wrist across the restaurant. But that night, I didn't just lose a husband, I found my backbone. Before I continue with what happened next, where are you watching from? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. I met James Donovan at a charity fundraiser in Boston on a crisp autumn evening. I was admiring a painting up for auction when he approached, champagne flute in hand, wearing a smile that would eventually break my heart. He was 38, confident with salt and pepper hair and the kind of charm that made you feel like the only person in a crowded room. "That piece is overvalued by at least $4,000, he whispered, leaning close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. "Actually," I replied, "it's undervalued by at least 6. The artist just had a major retrospective at MoMA." His eyebrows shot up, impressed. "I stand corrected. James Donovan," he said, extending his hand. "Miriam Carter." That night launched our whirlwind romance. 8 months of fancy dinners, weekend getaways to coastal Maine, and long conversations about art, politics, and the future. When he proposed on the rooftop of the Museum of Fine Arts with the Boston skyline glittering behind him, I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was everything I'd dreamed of. Intimate and elegant, held at my family's historic home in Massachusetts. My grandmother Eleanor, beaming with pride as she watched us exchange vows under the ancient oak tree her father had planted. "Miriam," she said at the reception, taking my hand in her weathered one, "I've been waiting for the right moment to pass this along." She clasped her silver bracelet around my wrist, the intricate filigree catching the afternoon light. "My mother gave this to me on my wedding day. It survived the Depression when little else did. Our family has always found a way to endure." I traced the delicate pattern with my finger. "It's beautiful, Grandma. Like your marriage will be," she assured me, patting my cheek. That James is a keeper. I believed her. I believed in us. My career as an art appraiser at Harrington's, one of Boston's most prestigious auction houses, was flourishing. I had a keen eye for undervalued pieces and had built a reputation that brought high-profile clients requesting me specifically. James was making his mark as a corporate attorney at Blackwell and Associates downtown, often working late to impress the partners. We complemented each other perfectly, or so I thought. Our brownstone in Beacon Hill, inherited from my grandmother when she moved to assisted living, became our sanctuary. 3 stories of history and character, with a garden where I tended to Eleanor's heirloom roses and herbs. We filled it with art from my connections and antiques from weekend trips to rural Massachusetts. It was the kind of home featured in magazines. And indeed, Boston Home did a spread on our renovation of the kitchen. Our friends envied what we had. Taylor and Ryan, who fought constantly, Stephanie and William struggling with infertility, Cara and David drifting apart after 20 years. At dinner parties, they'd make toasts to being like the Donovans someday, if only they knew what was coming. Those early years were golden. We travelled to France for our first anniversary, Italy for our second. We hosted legendary Christmas parties and summer barbecues. We talked about children. 2, we decided, maybe 3. I even converted the small 3rd-floor bedroom into a future nursery painting. The walls are gentle sage green. Looking back, the warning signs were there buried beneath the perfection. James working increasingly late. Unexplained charges at hotel bars when he claimed to be in client meetings. The way his phone would always be face down on tables. But I dismissed these concerns, buried them under rationalizations and trust. My best friend Naomi Taylor saw what I couldn't. At brunch, 6 months before everything fell apart, she cautiously asked, "Is everything okay with you and James? You seem, I don't know, tense around each other." "We're fine," I insisted, stirring my coffee more aggressively than necessary. "He's up for partner. It's just stress." Naomi's dark eyes, always too perceptive, studied me. You know you can tell me anything, right? No judgment. There's nothing to tell, I said with a laugh that sounded hollow even to me. Around that time, I started developing migraines, blinding headaches that forced me to lie in darkened rooms for hours, anxiety that woke me at 3 a.m, heart racing with no clear trigger. My body knew what my mind refused to acknowledge. Our 4th anniversary dinner at the top of the hub, James checked his phone 14 times, I counted. When I mentioned it, he said a major client was on the verge of signing. He barely touched the seafood tower between us, claiming stomach issues. The next day, I saw a charge from room service at the Ritz-Carlton on our credit card statement. For our 5th anniversary, I was determined to recapture what we'd lost. I made reservations at Lumiere, the most exclusive restaurant in Boston, with a 6-month waiting list I'd navigated through connections from work. James seemed genuinely excited when I told him kissing me more passionately than he had in months. 5 years, he said, his hands on my waist. Who would have thought who indeed? The first undeniable crack appeared in January, 7 months before our anniversary. James came home smelling of a perfume I didn't recognize, something with jasmine and vanilla notes, nothing like my signature scent. When I mentioned it, he didn't miss a beat. Lindsay from HR hugged me goodbye. She's leaving for maternity leave, he explained, loosening his tie and heading straight for the shower. I stood in our bedroom, his discarded shirt in my hands, wondering why this explanation left me feeling hollow. That night, I noticed his phone was now password protected. A new development. Just a security measure, he said casually when I asked. The firm handles sensitive information. All the partners are doing it. The next month brought unexplained charges at the Liberty Hotel bar, not once but 3 times in 2 weeks. When questioned, James waved it away as client meetings that ran late. You know how it is, Mir. We close more deals over drinks than in conference rooms. I did know how it was. My father had been in corporate law before retirement, but these explanations were starting to wear thin like fabric stretched too far. Then came Audrey Peterson, the new paralegal at James's firm. Initially, she was just a name mentioned in passing during dinner conversations. Audrey found a precedent case that might save our client millions. Audrey stayed until midnight helping prepare the briefs. Audrey suggested this new sushi place for lunch. Audrey. I met her at the firm's spring gala in April. She was younger than I expected, maybe 28, with auburn hair that cascaded down her back in loose waves. Beautiful in an effortless way, with bright green eyes that never quite met mine when James introduced us. Miriam, this is Audrey, our miracle worker, he said, his hand lingering on her lower back a moment too long. James exaggerates. She laughed, a musical sound that set my teeth on edge. I just do my research thoroughly. My gut twisted watching them together. The inside jokes, the finishing of each other's sentences, the subtle body language that spoke volumes. Something primitive in me recognized a threat even as my rational mind rejected the possibility. Our home life continued its subtle deterioration. Intimacy became rare, then practically non-existent. James claimed exhaustion, stress, early meetings the next day. Always a reasonable excuse. I bought expensive lingerie from La Perla, planned a surprise weekend in Vermont, suggested couples massage, all met with initial enthusiasm that somehow never materialized into connection. One night, I found the lingerie still in its gift box, pushed to the back of his dresser drawer while looking for a missing cufflink. 2 months after I'd given it to him, supposedly to wear for a special night soon. I confronted him about the texts after midnight, the way he angled his phone away, when I entered a room, the sudden business trips that hadn't been on his calendar the week before. You're being paranoid, he said, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. This is all in your head, Miriam. Maybe you should talk to someone about these delusions. That word, delusions, hit me like a physical blow. I began questioning everything, including my own perceptions. Was I overreacting, creating problems where none existed, sabotaging my marriage with unfounded jealousy? Gradually, our friends started seeing less of me. James would attend social functions alone, explaining that I wasn't feeling well or was buried in work. Miriam's been going through something lately. I overheard him telling Taylor at a party I'd forced myself to attend. Mood swings, paranoia, I'm really worried about her. I lost 12 pounds in 6 weeks. Sleep became elusive, my nights spent staring at the ceiling or checking James's phone while he slept, only to find nothing concrete. He was too careful for that. The house that had once been our sanctuary began to feel like an elaborate stage set, beautiful but hollow, hiding the rot beneath. By June, 2 months before our anniversary, I was a shadow of myself. Colleagues commented on my appearance, my distraction. I covered dark circles with concealer and forced smiles that never reached my eyes. I started having anxiety attacks in the bathroom at work, gasping for breath against the cold tile wall, wondering how my life had become unrecognizable. The emotional emptiness was the worst part. Where there had once been connection, there was now only performance. 2 people playing the roles of husband and wife without the substance behind it. On the rare nights when James was home for dinner, we ate in near silence, the television providing background noise to avoid the need for real conversation. I caught him staring at me, sometimes a strange mix of guilt and resentment in his eyes, as though my very presence was an inconvenience. In those moments, I felt like a ghost in my own home, invisible, yet somehow still in the way. By July, suspicion had become my constant companion. It followed me through quiet rooms and woke me from fitful sleep. I began documenting everything in a journal locked in my desk at work: dates, times, inconsistencies in stories. I wasn't sure what I was preparing for, but some part of me knew I would need evidence eventually. As our anniversary approached, I clung to the hope that this milestone might somehow reset us, that the romantic dinner at Lumiere might remind us both of what we once had. I was drowning, and this reservation was the last lifeline I could throw myself. The weeks leading up to our 5th anniversary brought a renewed sense of hope. 5 years was significant. Wood anniversary, symbolizing the deep roots of a strong marriage. The irony doesn't escape me now. I approached our celebration with the desperation of someone trying to salvage something precious. I spent an entire Saturday finding the perfect dress, a midnight blue silk that made my eyes look deeper and hugged my too thin frame in a way that almost made me recognize myself again. I scheduled a hair appointment, a manicure, even a facial, investments in the fantasy that beauty could somehow repair what was broken between us. James seemed to respond to my enthusiasm, suggesting we take the entire day off work to celebrate. 5 years deserves special treatment, he said over breakfast one morning, reaching for my hand across the table, a gesture that had become so rare it nearly brought tears to my eyes. I found him the perfect gift, a first edition Hemingway he'd admired at an auction months earlier. I'd called in favours and spent more than I should have, but it felt important, symbolic. I wrapped it in heavy cream paper with a simple navy ribbon. The night before our anniversary, I took special care laying out my grandmother's bracelet on my jewellery tray. The silver filigree caught the light, throwing delicate shadows across the wood. Family heirloom, survivor of hard times, symbol of endurance. I needed its strength more than ever. Our anniversary morning dawned bright and clear. August 16th, a perfect summer day in Boston. James left early for a quick meeting, promising to be home by noon so we could enjoy the day together. I spent the morning preparing each ritual, an act of faith in our future. The careful application of makeup, the spritz of perfume at my wrists and neck, the bracelet clasped around my wrist, cool silver against my skin. At 3:17 p.m. with no sign of James and our reservation, at 7:00 my phone chimed. Running later than expected. Critical client issue. Meet you at Lumiere. So, sorry. Disappointment bloomed in my chest, but I pushed it down. One text wasn't going to ruin our night. I replied with a simple, "Okay, see you at 7, and continued getting ready, adjusting my expectations as I had become accustomed to doing. I arrived at Lumiere at 6:50, the Boston evening still bright with summer sunlight. The restaurant was everything I'd hoped for. Elegant, without being stuffy, with soft lighting and well-spaced tables that promised privacy. Reservation for Donovan. I told the hostess, a slender woman with an impeccable French accent. She checked her screen, frowned slightly. "I'm sorry, we don't seem to have a reservation under that name tonight." "That's impossible," I said, checking my phone to confirm the date. "I made it months ago. 2 people, 700 p.m. under Donovan." She clicked through several screens. "Ah, I see the issue. Your reservation was changed yesterday to tomorrow night. Same time. Changed, I didn't change it." She offered an apologetic smile. "It says here the change was made by James Donovan by phone at 4:38 p.m. yesterday." The floor seemed to shift beneath me. There must be some mistake. "Would you like to see if we can accommodate you tonight?" We had a cancellation at the bar. The bar. Not what I'd planned for our special night, but at this point, I just wanted to sit down before my knees gave out. "That would be fine, thank you." I ordered champagne, Dom Perignon, what we'd had at our wedding. Might as well celebrate something, even if it was just my growing clarity about my marriage. I took a long sip, letting the bubbles burn down my throat, and tried to decide what to do next. Call James, wait a while longer, go home. The decision was made for me when at 7:32 p.m. James walked through the door of Lumiere, not alone, with Audrey. They didn't see me at the bar, partly hidden by a decorative column. I watched champagne glass frozen halfway to my lips as the hostess greeted them warmly. No confusion about their reservation. They were led to a corner table, intimate and romantic, with a view of the garden. I should have left. Any reasonable person would have gathered their dignity and walked out. Instead, I stayed, ordered another glass, and watched my marriage disintegrate in real time. James pulled out Audrey's chair, his hand lingering on her shoulder. He sat close to her, closer than necessary. They laughed, heads bent toward each other. He reached across the table to touch her hand while they studied the menus. All the small gestures of affection that had disappeared from our relationship now lavished on another woman. Their waiter appeared with champagne, the bottle I had arranged weeks earlier as a surprise part of our anniversary package. James accepted it with a smile, no confusion crossing his face as the waiter offered congratulations. They toasted, crystal flutes clinking. "To new beginnings," I heard James say, his voice carrying just far enough in a moment of quiet. My hands shook as I set down my glass, afraid I might shatter it in my grip. New beginnings. While I was desperately trying to save what we had, he was already celebrating its end. The final blow came during dessert. From my position, I watched James reach into his pocket and withdraw a small box. Not a ring box, thankfully. That humiliation was spared. Instead, he pulled out my grandmother's bracelet, the one currently on my wrist. No, not mine. A twin, identical in every detail. Audrey's eyes widened as he clasped it around her wrist. Even from a distance, I could see tears spring to her eyes at whatever he was saying. I moved closer, ostensibly heading to the restroom, and caught fragments of their conversation. "Family heirloom," James was saying, his voice thick with emotion I once thought genuine. "My grandmother's from the Depression era, symbol of endurance." He was giving her my history, stealing my legacy and gifting it to his mistress. In that moment, something crystallized within me. The fog of confusion and self-doubt that had clouded my mind for months burned away, replaced by a clarity so sharp it was almost painful. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I signed my tab, took a final fortifying sip of champagne, and walked deliberately toward their table, my grandmother's true bracelet glinting on my wrist. Time seemed to slow as I approached their table, each step deliberate on the polished hardwood floor. A server passing with a tray of cocktails gave me a curious glance. The soft jazz from the piano in the corner provided an incongruously elegant soundtrack to the scene about to unfold. James saw me first. The transformation of his face would have been comical under different circumstances, from romantic adoration to shock to poorly concealed panic in the span of 3 seconds. He half rose from his seat, champagne sloshing in his flute. "Miriam," he stammered, voice pitched higher than normal. "What are you doing here?" Audrey turned confusion clouding her green eyes before recognition dawned. She glanced down at her wrist, then up at me, then to James. The pieces were visibly connecting in her mind. I ignored James completely, addressing Audrey directly. "I'm sorry to interrupt your evening. I'm Miriam Donovan, James's wife." Her face drained of colour. "Wife?" She looked to James. "You said you were divorced." "We are. I mean, we're separated. Miriam, you shouldn't be here." James hissed, looking around at nearby tables where diners were beginning to notice the unfolding drama. I maintained a calm I didn't know I possessed. "How interesting. Our divorce paperwork must have gotten lost in the mail, along with your explanation for changing our anniversary dinner reservation." Audrey's eyes widened further. "Anniversary? 5 years today," I confirmed, holding up my left hand where my wedding ring caught the light. James tried to regain control. "Miriam, you're making a scene. This is just a business dinner with a colleague." "Is that what the kids are calling it these days?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Then I turned back to Audrey, whose embarrassment was rapidly transforming into anger. "I have a question. Has he told you about the brownstone in Beacon Hill, the one he claims is his family's historic home?" She nodded slowly, wariness creeping into her expression. "And I assume he's mentioned his grandmother's bracelet, the family heirloom you're wearing right now." James stood, fully desperation radiating from him. "This isn't the place, Miriam. We can talk about this at home." "Which home would that be, James?" "My grandmother's house that you've been pretending belongs to your family." I reached down and gently took Audrey's hand. She didn't resist as I unclasped the bracelet from her wrist. The replica was good, excellent even, but lacked the small scratch near the clasp that my grandmother had put there accidentally during the war. "You're right about one thing," I said, holding up both bracelets so they caught the light. "This design is a family heirloom. It belonged to my grandmother, who survived the Great Depression and gave it to me on our wedding day." I slipped the replica into my purse. "Along with the house you're now evicted from." James actually laughed, a short, dismissive sound intended to make me seem ridiculous. "You can't evict me from my own home, Miriam. Maybe you should call your doctor, adjust your medication." "Interesting you should mention calls," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "I called Bradley Wilson this afternoon, my family's attorney. He confirmed what I already knew. The house remained in my name alone after my grandmother transferred the deed. You have no legal claim to it." The smirk melted from James's face. "You wouldn't." "The locks have already been changed," Audrey began, gathering her purse, clearly eager to escape. "I should go." James grabbed her wrist. "Wait. This is all a misunderstanding." I leaned closer to Audrey. "For what it's worth, I don't think you knew. But you might want to ask him about Lindsay from HR, or why he's had 3 client meetings at the Ritz this month alone." She yanked her arm away from him. "Don't call me again, James. Either of my numbers." With that parting shot, she hurried toward the exit, leaving James and me facing each other across the half-empty table. "You've lost your mind!" he snarled, abandoning any pretense of the charming man I'd married. "You think you can humiliate me and get away with it?" "You did that all on your own," I replied, aware of the restaurant manager approaching from behind. "Happy anniversary, James." His hand shot out, gripping my forearm with bruising intensity. "You're not walking away from this. That house is as much mine as yours after 5 years." The manager, a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard, appeared at James's side. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to release the lady and lower your voice." "Stay out of this!" James snapped his grip, tightening. Either you let go of my arm and leave peacefully, or I press charges for assault, I said quietly. Your choice. Something in my tone must have penetrated his anger. He released my arm, leaving red marks that would later bloom into bruises. This isn't over, he promised, his voice low and dangerous. The manager stepped between us. Sir, I'm going to escort you to the door now. James threw his napkin onto the table. I know the way out. He stormed past us, bumping my shoulder hard enough to make me stumble. The manager steadied me. Are you all right, ma'am? Should we call the police? I rubbed my arm, watching James disappear through the front entrance. No, thank you, but I'll be fine. Outside, I ordered an Uber, hand shaking too badly to consider driving. As the city lights blurred past the window, the adrenaline that had sustained me drained away, leaving me hollow. Tears came silently at first, then in heaving sobs that concerned my driver enough to offer tissues from a travel pack. Bad night, he asked, meeting my eyes briefly in the rearview mirror. I laughed through tears. You could say that. When I arrived home, my home, I called Naomi. It was after 10, but she answered on the second ring. Mir, what's wrong? Everything, I choked out. James, affair, anniversary, please come. To her credit, she asked no questions. 20 minutes, don't move. While waiting, I changed out of my beautiful dress into sweatpants and an old Harvard t-shirt. I removed all traces of makeup, scrubbing my face until it was red and raw, a physical match to the emotional flaying I'd just endured. Naomi arrived in 18 minutes, still wearing pajama pants, under her coat hair hastily pulled back. She took one look at me and opened her arms. I collapsed into them, fresh tears soaking her shoulder. Once I could speak, the story poured out of me. The reservation change, the other woman, the bracelet, the confrontation. I suspected for months, Naomi admitted, as we sat on my kitchen floor, sharing the emergency pint of ice cream she'd brought. The way he looked at that woman at the Christmas party, the excuses whenever we invited you both out. I didn't want to say anything without proof. Why didn't I see it? I whispered, digging my spoon into vanilla bean. Because you trusted him. That's not a character flaw, Mir. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from James, alternating between threats and pleas, becoming increasingly incoherent as the night progressed. I silenced it, focusing instead on the first steps of my new reality, with Naomi's help. By 2 a.m. we had a plan. Not perfect, but a starting point. Naomi insisted on staying curling up beside me in my bed like we used to do during college finals week. As I drifted into exhausted sleep, I realized that while my marriage had ended tonight, something else had begun, my liberation from a beautiful lie. The pounding on the front door started at 3:17 a.m., jarring me from fitful sleep. Naomi bolted upright beside me, hair wild from sleep. It's him, I said unnecessarily. The slurred shouting from the porch confirmed it. Miriam, open the goddamn door! This is my house. Naomi reached for her phone. I'm calling 911. I placed my hand over hers. Not yet. I slipped out of bed and went to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtain. James was swaying on the porch, tie loosened and shirt partially unbuttoned. He pounded again, the sound reverberating through the old house. I know you're in there. You can't lock me out of my own home. I picked up my phone and began recording video, capturing his rage, the time stamp, the threats. Evidence. The rational part of my brain was already thinking like this, documenting, preparing. After 15 minutes of alternating between threats and pleas, he finally gave up, kicking over a potted plant, before stumbling down the steps. I watched him get into an Uber, continuing to record until the taillights disappeared around the corner. You need to call someone, Naomi insisted when I returned to bed. A lawyer, the police, someone. I will, I promised. First thing in the morning. Morning came too quickly. Grey light filtering through the curtains I'd forgotten to close properly. Naomi was already up, the smell of coffee wafting up the stairs. My phone showed 17 missed calls, and 23 text messages from James. I deleted them all without reading. At 8 a.m. sharp, I called Bradley Wilson. He'd been my family's attorney since I was a child, handling my grandmother's estate and the property transfer. His secretary put me through immediately. "Miriam, what can I do for you? I need to know my options for filing for divorce and possibly a restraining order," I said. Surprised by the steadiness in my voice, there was a brief pause. "I see. When would you like to come in? Today, if possible. I'll move some things around. Can you be here at 11? Bradley's office was in a historic building downtown, all dark wood and leather-bound books. He'd aged since I'd last seen him, his hair more silver than brown now, but his sharp blue eyes were unchanged. He listened without interruption as I explained the situation, taking occasional notes. "The good news," he said when I finished, "is that the house is clearly yours. Your grandmother was very specific about that in her will and the deed transfer. James has no claim to it whatsoever. And the bad news, Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state for divorce. While he can't touch the house, he may be entitled to a portion of assets acquired during the marriage." I thought of our joint accounts investment portfolio art collection. What if he's already taking steps to hide or transfer assets? Bradley's eyebrows rose. "You suspect financial misconduct. I know my husband," I said grimly. "He wouldn't leave anything to chance." We spent the next hour outlining a strategy. Freezing joint accounts, documenting assets, preparing initial divorce paperwork. By the time I left his office, I had a clear path forward and the first semblance of control I'd felt in months. That afternoon, my suspicions were confirmed. I discovered our joint checking account had been drained overnight. The savings account, too. Nearly $90,000 gone. I called the bank immediately, but the damage was done. James had acted quickly after realizing I was serious. I spent the rest of the day in grim productivity, changing passwords, freezing credit cards, notifying my workplace of the situation. Sandra, my boss at Harrington's, was unexpectedly supportive. "Take whatever time you need," she said. And Miriam, for what it's worth, I went through something similar 10 years ago. It gets better. I wanted desperately to believe her. James made no further attempts to contact me until the following day, when I received an email from his personal account. The subject line read simply, "Let's be reasonable." The message was pure James, condescending, manipulative, with just enough truth mixed in to sound plausible. He claimed I'd misunderstood the situation with Audrey, that yes, he'd made a mistake, but my erratic behavior and emotional instability had driven him to seek comfort elsewhere, that we could work through this if I would just be reasonable and let him come home. What caught my attention, however, was the final paragraph: "I've taken steps to protect our joint assets until you're thinking clearly again. This vindictive behavior isn't like you, Miriam. I'm concerned about your mental health." I forwarded the email to Bradley without comment. Over the next few days, I dove into research mode, combing through our financial records, emails, phone statements, anything that might give me insight into James's deception. What I found was staggering. Email evidence of the affair with Audrey going back 18 months, almost a third of our marriage. Hotel charges in New York and Chicago when he claimed to be at conferences. A secret credit card I knew nothing about with charges for jewelry, restaurants, weekend getaways. A lease application for an apartment in Back Bay dated 3 weeks earlier. He'd been planning his exit for months, carefully extracting himself while keeping me in the dark. The anniversary dinner wasn't a spontaneous mistake. It was carelessness born of confidence that I would never discover the truth. A week after the Lumiere incident, James escalated. He showed up at Harrington's during my lunch break, causing a scene in the lobby that required security intervention. He appeared at a coffee shop across from our house, watching me come and go. He sent flowers with cards bearing veiled threats disguised as apologies. Each incident was documented, photographed, reported. The file Bradley was building grew thicker. The final straw came 2 weeks after our anniversary. I woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of breaking glass. Someone, James, was attempting to break in through the garden door. I called 911, then Naomi, barricading myself in the bathroom until I heard sirens approaching. The police caught him in the act glass shards on his sleeve and a garden brick in hand. The officers were sympathetic, especially after seeing the growing file of documentation and the bruises on my arm that had only recently faded. "You need to file for an emergency restraining order," one officer advised as they led James to the patrol car. "This behavior typically escalates." The next morning, I did exactly that. The process was dehumanizing, explaining my fear to strangers, detailing the pattern of behavior, answering invasive questions about our marriage. But by afternoon, I had a temporary order prohibiting James from coming within 500 feet of me or my home. As I left the courthouse protection order in hand, I felt a curious mixture of relief and sadness. The document made real what I had been avoiding, fully accepting. My marriage was over, destroyed, not by the affair itself, but by the months of gaslighting and manipulation that had preceded it. That night, sitting in my grandmother's garden, where her roses still bloomed defiantly against the late summer heat, I allowed myself to truly grieve. Not for the loss of James, that pain would come later, but for the loss of the future I had planned, the children we would never have, the anniversaries that would never be celebrated. "You were wrong about one thing, Grandma," I whispered to the stars. He wasn't a keeper after all, but she'd been right about something more important. Our family had always found a way to endure, and I would too. With the restraining order in place, I began to establish a new routine: therapy twice a week, a support group for women leaving abusive relationships, a label I initially resisted but eventually accepted, regular check-ins with Bradley about the divorce proceedings, lunch with Naomi every Saturday. Slowly, I started putting the pieces of myself back together, not into the same shape as before, but into something new, something stronger. The private investigator Bradley recommended uncovered even more deception, another affair, before Audrey questionable financial transactions discussions, with a broker about selling artwork from our home that legally belonged to me. Each discovery was another cut, but no longer fatal. I was healing even as the battle was just beginning. The manila envelope containing the divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by courier to my office. I signed for it with hands that trembled only slightly, tucking it into my desk drawer to review after hours when the quiet would allow me to focus properly. Seeing our names typed in cold legal language, petitioner Miriam Eleanor Carter Donovan and respondent James William Donovan, made the situation undeniably real in a way that even the restraining order hadn't. 17 pages detailing the dissolution of 5 years together, reduced to assets, liabilities, and legal obligations. I met with Bradley the next morning to review the filing before submission. His office had become a strange sort of sanctuary over the past weeks, a place where chaos was transformed into order, where emotional devastation became actionable items on a checklist. "He's hired Lawrence Kessler," Bradley informed me, referencing one of Boston's most aggressive divorce attorneys. "This signals he's prepared for a fight. Then we'll give him one," I replied, signing the final page with more force than necessary. The official filing initiated a process more grueling than I had anticipated. Discovery, the legal term for the exchange of information between parties, became a full-time job alongside my actual career. Financial statements, property assessments, text message, logs, email, archives, every aspect of our life together dissected and catalogued. James's initial response to the divorce petition was predictable, a countersuit claiming emotional distress and defamation related to the restaurant incident. He demanded half the value of the house despite the clear inheritance documentation and alimony based on my superior financial position at Harrington's. "It's a negotiating tactic," Bradley assured me. "Start with outrageous demands and settle for what you actually want." But what did James actually want? The question haunted me as I prepared for my deposition, 8 hours of answering questions under oath, while James and his attorney watched. I spent hours with Bradley practicing responses, learning when to elaborate and when to simply answer yes or no. The night before the deposition, I barely slept. Anxiety coiled in my stomach like a venomous snake striking at random intervals to send waves of nausea through my body. I tried meditation techniques my therapist had suggested, breathing exercises, even a hot bath with lavender oil, but nothing calmed the storm inside me. Morning came with no relief. I dressed carefully in a navy suit that projected competence and stability, applied makeup to cover the shadows under my eyes, and clasped my grandmother's bracelet around my wrist, my talisman against whatever the day would bring. The conference room at Kessler's firm was deliberately intimidating. 21st floor views of Boston Harbor leather chairs that made me feel small, a massive table of polished mahogany that reflected the harsh fluorescent lights. James sat across from me, impeccably dressed in a suit I had bought him for Christmas, his expression a practiced mask of concern. "You look tired, Miriam," he said, as I took my seat, his voice carrying just enough solicitude to seem appropriate to observers. Bradley placed a hand on my arm. "We're not here for personal observations, Mr. Donovan." The deposition proceeded with excruciating slowness. Kessler's questions designed to provoke emotional responses, to make me appear unstable or vindictive. When did I first suspect the affair? Had I ever sought psychiatric treatment for my paranoia? Wasn't it true that I had publicly humiliated his client in a respected establishment? Did I often create scenes when upset through it all? I maintained the calm Bradley had coached me to project, answering truthfully but carefully, refusing to rise to the bait of questions designed to provoke an outburst. 6 hours in Kessler's frustration became evident in his increasingly aggressive questioning. "Mrs. Donovan, would you describe yourself as emotionally stable?" "Yes," I replied simply. "Yet you admit to breaking down crying in an Uber after the restaurant incident. I admit to having a human reaction to discovering my husband's infidelity. Yes. And you admit to changing the locks on the marital home without notice. I admit to securing property that is legally mine after receiving threats." Each exchange was a small victory, a reclamation of the narrative James had tried to control. By the final hour, even Kessler seemed to recognize his strategy wasn't working as planned. When it was over, I was physically and emotionally drained but standing. James caught my eye as I gathered my things, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I had fallen in love with, or thought I had fallen in love with, and felt an unexpected pang of grief for what might have been. The next phase of the battle focused on the bracelet, which had become both literal and symbolic evidence in our property division. James claimed it had been a gift to him from my grandmother, intended for family, rather than me specifically making it marital property subject to division. "It's a transparent attempt to hurt you," Bradley observed as we prepared our response. He knows its sentimental value. My grandmother, now 92, and in assisted living, provided a sworn affidavit confirming her intent in gifting the bracelet specifically to me as a female descendant. Her testimony, though brief, was powerful. The clear recollection of a woman who had survived the Depression, 2 wars, and the loss of her husband, and who wasn't about to let a smooth-talking charlatan claim her family heirloom. 3 months into proceedings, when it became clear his initial strategy wasn't working, James attempted reconciliation. He sent an email expressing regret, claiming he'd made the biggest mistake of his life and wanted to make things right. He asked to meet for coffee, just to talk, no attorneys, no accusations. I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the delete button. Something in his words tugged at the part of me that still remembered loving him, that wondered if 5 years could really end like this. Against my better judgment, I forwarded the email to Naomi before responding. Her reply came within minutes. "Meet me for lunch, now." at the small Italian bistro near her office. Naomi slid her phone across the table without preamble. "Before you answer James, you should see this." It was an Instagram post from 2 days earlier. Audrey at a rooftop bar, cocktail in hand, golden hour light, making her auburn hair glow. And in the background, barely visible but unmistakable, James, his arm around another woman's waist. "He's still seeing her," I said flatly. "And apparently others," Naomi confirmed. "My colleague's sister works at that bar, says he's been there multiple times with different women. The revelation should have hurt. Instead, it was the final push I needed to sever the emotional cord still tethering me to the past." I deleted James' email without responding and blocked his personal address. The case took an unexpected turn when Audrey Peterson contacted Bradley voluntarily. She had discovered, as I had warned at the restaurant, that she wasn't the only special exception in James's life. She offered to testify about his pattern of deception, the lies about being divorced, the promises of a future together, the gifts purchased with joint funds. Bradley was cautiously optimistic. Her testimony could be powerful, especially regarding his character and financial misconduct. The day of the hearing arrived 6 months after our anniversary night at Lumiere. I had lost weight, then gained it back, cut my hair short, then let it grow, learned to sleep alone in the house that had once felt so full of our shared future. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wooden benches worn smooth by years of anxious witnesses. James and Kessler sat at one table, Bradley and I at another. When Audrey entered to testify, James visibly blanched, adjusting his tie in a nervous gesture I recognised all too well. Her testimony was devastating in its simplicity. She described James's systematic deception, the stories about a cruel, unstable wife, the promises of divorce, any day now, the gifts purchased with money that wasn't his to spend. She produced text messages showing James had continued pursuing her even after the restraining order was in place, undermining his claims of seeking reconciliation. When asked why she had come forward, her answer was direct: "Because I was lied to as well, and I believe in karma." James took the stand, next his testimony, a study in controlled aggression. He portrayed me as emotionally volatile himself, as a devoted husband pushed to indiscretion by my increasing instability. His performance was polished convincing until Bradley's cross-examination. "Mr. Donovan, could you explain this credit card statement showing charges at Tiffany's on the same day you claim to have been in Chicago for work? Mr. Donovan, can you reconcile your claim of financial transparency with these undisclosed accounts discovered during discovery? Mr. Donovan, if you were seeking genuine reconciliation with your wife, why does your phone record show 17 calls to Ms. Peterson during that same period?" With each question, James's composure cracked further. By the final exchange, he was visibly angry, his responses clipped and defensive. The turning point came when he interrupted the judge, a fundamental error that drew an immediate reprimand. "Mr. Donovan," the judge said sternly, "your attitude is not helping your case." James's response, a muttered comment just audible enough to be heard, earned him a contempt warning. His face flushed dark red, a vein pulsing at his temple. I recognized the signs of his temper fraying beyond his control. "This is ridiculous," he finally snapped, rising from the witness stand without permission. "She locked me out of my own house, humiliated me publicly, and I'm the one being treated like a criminal." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Donovan, resume your seat immediately, or you will be held in contempt." Instead, James turned to me, pointing an accusatory finger. "You planned this whole thing, you manipulative, vindictive—" "Mr. Donovan," the judge's voice cut through the courtroom. "That is enough. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Donovan back to his seat." As the bailiff approached, something in James seemed to snap. He swept his arm across the witness stand, sending a water glass shattering to the floor. "This is a setup. She's turned everyone against me." The courtroom froze in shocked silence. Even Kessler looked mortified, his face in his hands. In that moment, James revealed what I had gradually come to understand over our years together. Beneath the charm and sophistication lay a man who couldn't bear losing control, who lashed out when cornered. The judge ordered a brief recess. When proceedings resumed 20 minutes later, James had been removed from the courtroom, and Kessler appeared resigned to damage control. The judge's ruling came down firmly. The house remained my separate property as inherited. James's claims for alimony were denied based on financial misconduct. The restraining order was made permanent based on the pattern of escalating behaviour. It wasn't a complete victory. Some joint assets required division, and the legal fees had been substantial, but it was enough. As we left the courthouse, Bradley squeezed my shoulder. "It's done, Miriam. You can start rebuilding now." And for the first time in nearly a year, I believed that might actually be possible. 6 months after the final court hearing, I sat in my grandmother's garden on a crisp spring morning, coffee warming my hands, watching as the first daffodils pushed through the soil. The past year had reshaped me in ways I was only beginning to understand, like a bone broken and reset stronger at the point of fracture. The initial months after the divorce were the hardest. Despite the clear evidence of James's betrayal, despite the legal vindication, I still found myself waking in the night, reaching for someone who was no longer there. Grief doesn't follow logical pathways. It meanders through memories lingering in unexpected places. The scent of his cologne on a sweater I missed during the purge, the instinct to buy his favourite cereal at the grocery store, the empty space on the bathroom counter where his electric razor used to sit. My therapist, Dr. Helen Winters, helped me navigate these moments. "You're not mourning James," she explained during one particularly difficult session. "You're mourning the future you thought you would have. That's a different kind of loss." This framework gave me permission to grieve without feeling foolish for missing someone who had caused me so much pain. I established new routines, reclaimed spaces that had been ours, and made them definitively mine. I painted the bedroom a deep teal that James would have hated, rearranged furniture, planted vegetables instead of ornamentals in the back garden. Physically, the transformation was equally profound. The migraines that had plagued me during the worst of the gaslighting disappeared entirely. I slept through the night for the first time in years. My appetite returned, and with it the weight I had lost during the divorce proceedings. I cut my hair into a short bob that felt like shedding an old skin. Professionally, I channeled my energy into work, earning a promotion to senior appraiser at Harrington's. Sandra, my boss, who had been so supportive during the worst days, became a mentor and friend. "You have a better eye than ever," she told me after I identified an undervalued cassette at an estate sale. "Sometimes we see more clearly after trauma." Naomi remained my constant, the friendship that had weathered the storm strengthening in its aftermath. She dragged me to yoga classes I pretended to hate, but secretly enjoyed, introduced me to her wider circle of friends, created space for me to discover who Miriam Carter was without James Donovan attached to her name. My support group became another pillar of recovery. Every Tuesday evening in the basement of a community centre downtown, I sat in a circle with women whose stories echoed aspects of my own. Different details, same patterns. Manipulation, gaslighting, isolation, the gradual erosion of self. Together, we rebuilt our boundaries, recognized red flags we had previously ignored, practiced saying no without apology. It was at group that I met Danielle, whose husband had cleaned out their accounts before fleeing to Costa Rica, and Teresa, whose girlfriend had systematically alienated her from friends and family over 7 years. These women understood what even well-meaning friends like Naomi couldn't fully grasp: the particular shame of having loved someone who was simultaneously desirable and destructive. The first time I considered dating again came as a surprise, arriving as a casual thought while watching a man at a cafe carefully select a book for his elderly mother. Just a fleeting notion, he seems kind, that signaled some fundamental healing had occurred without my conscious awareness. I approached dating cautiously, meeting Daniel Crawford, an architect with his own divorce history, through a mutual friend's dinner party. We moved slowly. Coffee first, then lunch, then dinner, each step deliberate and considered. He understood my hesitation, having walked a similar path. "Trust is earned," he said on our third date, when I explained why I wasn't ready for a physical relationship. "I'm willing to earn it." 6 weeks into dating, I gave Naomi permission to do a background check. "Absolutely normal," she assured me when I expressed embarrassment. I'd do the same. When Daniel came back clean, no criminal record, no suspicious financial activity references that checked out, I allowed myself to relax incrementally. We developed a rhythm, a cautious dance of disclosure and connection. He told me about his ex-wife's gambling addiction that had nearly bankrupted them. I shared my story in careful segments, watching for his reactions. We recognized in each other the particular wariness of those who had trusted unwisely before. The brownstone, for all its beauty, held too many memories. After much consideration, I decided to sell it, a decision my grandmother supported from her assisted living apartment. "Houses are just shells, Miriam," she said, her hands now too arthritic to wear her wedding ring. "It's the people inside them that matter." The sale was quick. Historic homes in Beacon Hill rarely lingered on the market, and surprisingly liberating. I found a smaller place in the South End, an artist's loft with exposed brick and massive windows that flooded the space with light. It had no history with James, no corners where arguments had occurred, no rooms where promises had been broken. Moving day brought unexpected closure. As the last box left the brownstone, I walked through empty rooms that had witnessed both my greatest happiness and deepest pain. In the master bedroom, I found a cufflink James had missed during his court-supervised property retrieval, platinum with a small sapphire, a gift from our second anniversary. I considered keeping it, then left it deliberately on the windowsill. Some things weren't worth carrying forward. One ordinary Tuesday, almost exactly a year after the Lumiere incident, I encountered Audrey at a coffee shop near the courthouse. We spotted each other simultaneously, the initial shock giving way to awkward recognition. After a moment's hesitation, I gestured to the empty chair at my table. To my surprise, she accepted. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble, clutching her cappuccino with both hands. "You didn't know," I replied, meaning it. "I should have seen the signs." The secretiveness, the inconsistent stories. She shook her head. "I was an idiot. That makes 2 of us." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. 3, actually. There was another woman before me, and apparently several after. We talked for nearly an hour, comparing notes on James's manipulation techniques, the red flags we'd both ignored, the process of rebuilding. It was strangely therapeutic, this conversation, with the woman who had once been the embodiment of my marital collapse. Before leaving, she hesitated, then offered a final piece of information. "He's leaving Boston, took a job in Seattle last month." The news settled like a stone dropping into still water, a momentary disturbance, then calm. James leaving Boston meant one less chance encounter, one less reason to scan restaurant interiors before being seated. It meant true closure. "I hope he finds what he's looking for," I said, surprising myself with the absence of bitterness. "I hope we both do," Audrey replied, gathering her things. "Good luck, Miriam." I didn't need luck, I realized as I watched her leave. I had something more substantial, resilience built from survival wisdom earned through pain boundaries, fortified by betrayal. On August 16th, what would have been our 6th anniversary, I spent the evening alone by choice. Not in mourning, but in celebration of my freedom. I opened a bottle of champagne, not Dom Perignon this time, but a small batch Prosecco recommended by the owner of my neighbourhood wine shop. I wore my grandmother's bracelet, now a symbol not of marriage, but of endurance across generations of women who had faced hardship and emerged intact. I sat on my new balcony, overlooking the city lights, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The woman who had sat at that bar in Lumiere, watching her marriage disintegrate in real time, would not recognize the person I had become. Stronger, certainly, but also more compassionate even toward myself. The most profound change wasn't external, but internal. The quiet certainty that I could trust my own perceptions again. The gaslighting had ended, the fog had cleared, and in its place was a clarity that extended beyond my relationship with James to every aspect of my life. I had learned that love without respect is merely addiction, that trusting blindly isn't a virtue, but a vulnerability, that boundaries aren't walls, but vital demarcations of selfhood, that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. Most importantly, I had learned that betrayal, while devastating, need not be defining. It can instead be transformative, the painful catalyst for authentic self-discovery. As I raised my glass to the Boston skyline, I made a toast, not to new beginnings or better men or happier endings, but to the woman who had walked through fire and emerged not unmarked, but undefeated, to the wisdom that comes only through suffering, to the strength found not in avoiding pain but in surviving it, to myself. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone you trusted completely betrayed you? The path to healing is different for everyone, but I'd love to hear your stories of resilience in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of survival and transformation. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful rebuilding happens after the most complete destruction. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find strength in your own.